listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Tricia Gardner.
Thanks to our sponsor, BBO Poker Tables. You can check out their tables at www.bbopokertables.com. Welcome on to the show. Today we've got a poker player called Carlos Welch coming onto the show. He's a poker player who's happy, which is why we've got him coming on. He travels around the live tour and he's found a way to quit his job and live the poker lifestyle. And we really liked some of the mindset stuff he had to say. So we're going to be talking to him later on this evening. So Tricia, what have you got for us this week?
Hey, I kind of have a study that I want to share that relates a little bit, to the happiness aspect. And it's a study that came out by a guy named Dr. Brandon Alderman. It's in a journal called Translational Psychiatry, and it's all about how you can reduce depression. And what they did was they took they took a group of people who suffer from depression, and they tried out a couple of activities to see if they would have an effect on depression. And both of these activities separately, we know reduce depression. One is meditation and the other is aerobic exercise. But they wanted to see if people did both of those activities, would they get a bigger reduction in depression? And lo and behold, people who did that twice a week for 2 months that were in the group, in the study, it was enough to reduce their depression by 40%.
That's quite incredible. I'm actually quite surprised by the fact it only needed to be twice a week.
I know. Usually you do see like a little bit more than that. What they did was it was 30 minutes of focused attention meditation followed by 30 minutes of aerobic exercise.
So in conjunction with each other, literally on the same day.
Exactly. So, before we've known for quite a while now that exercise is very key in reducing depression. And we've also known for quite a while now that meditation reduces depression. But what we didn't know is could we get a bigger effect if we combine the two? So it seems like if you start your day or end your day, however you want to do it, with 30 minutes of aerobic activity, which could just be brisk walking, by the way, and 30 minutes of meditation, then you could really, if you have any leanings towards depression, you could really see a very good reduction with that.
So guys, we tell you almost every show, so listen to us, even more evidence this week. Go for a run and meditate. It will be worthwhile, not just for your poker, but also for just how you feel in life in general.
Exactly.
So speaking of happiness, let's give Carlos a call and see what he has to say. So Carlos, welcome to the show. If you could introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thanks for having me. Well, my name is Carlos Welch. I am a poker player, but I don't really consider myself a professional poker player. I'm more of a professional poker student, which basically means I study the game and then I write articles just telling everybody about what I've learned. And I do make money from poker on the side, but I try not to consider myself a professional poker player just yet.
Do you feel like if someone considers themselves a professional poker player that maybe they might get out of the habit of study as much, or is that kind of impacting you or not?
That definitely plays into it, especially this year, 2016. I have one of my goals is to spend more time studying and less time playing. And if I was depending on income from poker just to make it day to day, then like the guys that do that, I can understand why they spend more time playing than studying. But since, I try to keep my expenses pretty low, that allows me time to do more studying than playing.
In terms of sort of your background and things and how you found poker, if you could talk the listeners through all of that.
Okay. So how I found poker. So first of all, I kind of grew up, I hate to use the word poor because since I've got started with poker, I've done a lot of traveling outside of the U.S. and I've seen real poverty, but I'll say relative to, other players in the United States, I grew up poor. And so I was always kind of looking for some type of like get rich quick scheme to, get out. And like poker was like one of the things that I found I can remember, just watching TV one night and saw that some guy named Moneymaker won money playing this game. And I was like, who writes this stuff? Like, this is like this is like the most obvious scam of all. And, it turns out it was real. And so Yeah, I basically found poker as a way to, escape poverty and just watching late night TV, like was all the infomercials with the get rich quick stuff, and just happened to run across WSOP one night.
And then how do you take it from you see, Chris Moneymaker on TV? How do you take it from that to where now you're traveling all the time and while you do study a lot, but you still do play a lot of poker? How'd you get there?
So I started off like most people, that first, I watched the show and then they advertised like party poker. And so I guess this was 2004 when I first started to play online. So I never really played poker live before I got into it online. So like most people grow up playing poker in their families, like we never played poker. It was always like spades. So I basically saw the party poker commercials and I was like, you know what, if some accountant from Tennessee can do it, then, I could do it too. I was pretty good at math. So I put $50 on party poker and played a cash game with my entire bankroll and lost it within an hour. So I thought I knew something about math, but apparently I did not. And, after that happened a couple of times, I went to the library and got a book to study it. And that's when I discovered 2+2. And then from there, a lot of the guys on the forums kind of helped me get better. And so that's kind of how I started from being a complete fish to, realizing that, there's strategy to the game and just progress from there.
I'm just curious, what book was it that you found in the library? Because most libraries don't really have, too many poker books.
The first book I read was an Ed Miller book that I want to say is the one he did with Skalansky. I may have the title wrong, but like Small Stakes Hold'em or something like that. And then Skalansky's Theory of Poker.
Okay, so you
go ahead.
You have a very progressive library of it, wherever you went.
I could be wrong. It was either the library or like Barnes and Nobles, which is really just a library to me.
Oh, okay, got it.
I never buy anything. I just go in there and read.
That brings it actually to the next question. On your website, you describe yourself as the King Nit. So how do you sort of justify that statement?
Okay, so for those that don't know, we all know what a nit is in poker. Somebody who is very careful about when they put chips in the pot. And I consider myself a life nit, meaning I'm very careful about how I spend money. And that basically just comes from growing up poor and also not really caring what people think. So that allows me to save a lot of money on clothing and, I try to get real creative in keeping my expenses low because I don't make a lot of money from poker. I didn't have a lot of money when I first got into poker. So in order for me to do the things that a lot of these other guys are doing, I got to kind of keep an eye on that bottom line. So where some of these guys maybe don't mind spending $20-$30 at Barnes & Noble for a book, I figure if they're going to let me read it for free, I'm just going to read it for free.
I think that's amazing. What are some of your best life nit tips you can share with our listeners who maybe have never thought about it from this angle before?
Okay, so one that I recently used, I'm currently in Vegas, and so I'm from Atlanta, and I recently bought a round trip ticket from Atlanta to Vegas for like $50, I believe it was. So I just found this good deal on Spirit Airlines, but Spirit does not allow you to bring carry-on bags and check bags unless you pay an extra fee. So I get around the extra fee by packing as much stuff as I can into a little backpack that they will let you bring. And anything that I can't fit in there, I just wear. So I wore like 3 outfits to get out here to get around that fee. So that's the one that's great for poker players who do a lot of traveling. I wore 3 pair of shorts and 3 shirts, and it was a little warm on the plane, but it was worth it for the amount I saved.
Save some money. And this is one of the things that a lot of players don't think about when they start out, if they're trying to make a living out of poker and make it work. In a lot of cases, it's the costs of actually following poker that can actually break people. So you can be a winning poker player, but if you don't manage to get your expenses under control, that can actually be the downfall of a lot of players, I think, especially in Vegas, where things can be unbelievably expensive.
Right, right. Okay, so when I started playing sit and goes, and I learned how to play sit and goes on 2+2, but I eventually moved on from those and started playing multi-table tournaments. And at that point, I moved to Tournament Poker Edge. And one of the owners, Killingbird, one of the owners of Tournament Poker Edge, has a phrase that it always sticks into my mind, and he calls it live rake. So like when you travel to these tournaments and then you stay in the hotels and you pay for all this expensive food in the casinos, really that should be counted as rake in whatever tournament you're playing. And if you do that, you realize that some of these tournaments are almost unbeatable if you consider that rake. So another thing I do to get around it is, for those that don't know, I live in a van. And so I'll drive my van to these events, and then I'll just sleep in the van for free while everybody else is, paying for hotel rooms that they barely use.
And I remember over the summer we chatted in Vegas. We were there for the series and we met up, and you were telling me you found like a really incredible deal on a room in Vegas, but I can't remember exactly how you did that.
Okay, so this is either the first year when I came to Vegas, when I had this room that I found on Craigslist with this crazy Brazilian lady. It's either that story, which...
Yes.
So I came to Vegas, and of course I didn't have any place to stay that first year, so I got a room like everybody else. But I told myself that while I'm in this room, I'm going to also be searching for cheaper places. It was cool for a weekend or two, but if I was going to stay for the whole summer, I couldn't afford to stay in a hotel that whole time. So I got on Craigslist and I found this lady who lives about a 5-minute drive from the Rio in a condo, and she had the room for like $580 a month. And I went to talk to her about it, and she likes to talk. And so she didn't let me get a word in edgewise. And so by the end of that first conversation, she kind of talked herself down to $350 a month. And so that's what I ended up paying to stay with her. And I did that for my first 3 years in Vegas during the WSOP.
Wow. So you're a long-term renter with this woman then?
Yes. So we're friends, and she expects me to come back every year. And I basically get that same deal. I mean, that's like, unheard of, to pay that price for the entire summer in Vegas during the WSOP. So that's one of my little life knit maneuvers that I'm really proud of.
And out of interest, in terms of, you've got the life knit side, but how are you with your bankroll management within poker, the game?
I basically try to stay with like far below what most people would count as good bankroll management. So for example, at the beginning of last year, I guess it was like April of last year, I won online tournament for $27,000. And so from that money, I set about $20,000 aside for my poker bankroll. I would occasionally play like $100 tournaments, but my average buy-in was, I'll say, between like 30 and 50. And most people with a 20K bankroll, they would be playing much higher than that.
And this is online though, I guess.
Yes.
Online. Okay.
This is online, and I just know that if I blow that roll, it's going to be very hard for me to replace it. And so I'm extra careful with bankroll management.
How do you kind of do your accounting and whatnot in the summertime? So when you're at the World Series, do you do a lot of satelliting? Do you play a lot of like the daily kind of tournaments? What's your, plans with that?
Yeah, so I started off playing a lot of dailies and also the single table satellites. So my first couple of years, that's where I spent the most of my bankroll in the summer. Since that time, I've gotten, like I said, I had the big score and I've gotten a bigger bankroll. So I'm kind of gradually stepping it up. So instead of playing, like I used to play like $150 to $200 tournaments down at Binion's and Golden Nugget. And then the next year I progressed to like Planet Hollywood. And this past year was my first time playing some bracelet events at the Rio. And for those, I just sell tons of action to try to get, the amount that I have in the game down to like anywhere from no more than maybe like 200, like anywhere from like $100 to $200 is usually how much skin I have in the game. So so to answer your question, just sell tons of action. When I did play the single table satellites, I didn't play them with the intention of getting into events. I would just sell the lammers and just keep the cash.
Do you see this as a way of you sort of living the dream, as it were, of being able to travel around playing poker, but just ensuring that you can do this by watching your costs so seriously?
Yes. For me, poker is not necessarily about, trying to become like a millionaire or anything. That would be cool, but just the freedom that I have on a day-to-day basis, not having to go to work and being able to do this job from pretty much anywhere in the world, and all the great people that I've met, like that's more of my motivation than, chasing financial glory or bracelets or trophies and all that stuff. So for my personal dream, this is fine. Like this is what I want, is to be able to, be at the Flamingo in Vegas on, 4 p.m. on a random Monday. Like this is not something that I could have done before poker. And if this is all I get out of poker, I'll be okay with that.
Well, I kind of think this is a great segue, because I know one of your big things is just being happy in life. So do you want to talk about kind of your philosophy around being a happy poker player, and then maybe give us some strategies on how you think that's possible? Yes.
So like, to me, that is almost like the point of life, in my opinion, is like just being, as happy and free as you possibly can. And a lot of people get into poker because they want that freedom and they want that happiness, but then they end up becoming like, slaves to the game, where they feel like they have to make a certain amount of money. And you see so many people playing when they don't want to be playing, and that just blows my mind. So for me, I try to always keep happiness as my main focus when I'm deciding if I'm going to play something. And part of me sticking to like the lower and middle stakes stuff is easier. And I feel like I'm constantly able to have an edge in those games because winning makes me happy. I don't want to play against the best players in the world. And I'm like, probably can't beat them anyway. And even if I could, it was like, it would be like such a grind to get to the level that it would take to beat those games that, I just don't care to play them. And I recently took a trip to the Dominican Republic for the Punta Cana Classic. And while I was there, I stayed with a friend in his little apartment on the beach. And there was this lady who would clean the apartment every day. And, if you know anything about the Dominican Republic, these people are like beyond poor. And I used to talk about, coming up from being poor until I went there. Like the police officers in the Dominican Republic make like 35 cents an hour. So you can imagine what this cleaning lady makes. But, every day, she'd be out doing her job and singing and smiling and making everybody else happy. I saw that, and the thought that came to me is that anybody that grew up in any type of like first world country, we have zero excuses to not be happy, especially if you have the type of freedom that we have in poker. So I almost feel like it's my duty to be happy.
And I mean, that's something that's just so useful for a lot of poker players to hear. Obviously, we have lots and lots of the very high stakes players come on the show. And, in not all cases, when I'm talking to people who are very wealthy, they're particularly happy with their lives. And, having this idea of this freedom means that really try and enjoy it. You're not a slave to a boss telling you what to do, and you get to play a game for a living, and trying to see that optimistic side certainly must make your life far more enjoyable, Carlos.
Yes, definitely. Like you put it in great terms. We get to play a game for a living. Like, how great is that? Like, how is it that, you sit at a table and people are, complaining about the most mundane thing, and you constantly see people having fights at the table and on Twitter, and, just people just love to be like, bitter. And the word that I really want to avoid, which is something I see in a lot of poker players, is becoming jaded. It seems like as you get better with poker, it's like to be part of the cool club, you kind of have to be jaded and like act like, you're not, excited about poker anymore. I was like, I hope I never get to that point.
So you really still do love the game then?
I still love the game. And even on top of that, I love like the people in the game. Like, for example, like I still get like, a little excited when I see Phil Ivey, and there's a lot of people that, they try to force themselves to, become used to it. And you do get used to it to a certain extent. But like, I'm sure a lot of the guys that you have talked to will say that, they don't watch poker on TV anymore and they don't really get as excited for, tournaments and whatnot. And I don't want to lose that, like I'm still a fan of poker, although I've, kind of been in it for a while. I'm still a fan and I don't want to lose that. So whenever there's poker on TV, I can't wait to watch it.
And does this happiness translate to the table as well in terms of the way you deal with, a bad beat deep in an MTT and things like that?
It does translate when it comes to bad beats for the most part. I do complain a lot on Twitter. I'm kind of like a passive aggressive complainer. But it's like half joking, half like, entertaining the Twitter followers. Because a couple of them kind of like that. A lot of my following is other recreational players. So we kind of, have fun with that. But probably my biggest tilt issue is people in general. So if I have if I'm playing live poker and I take a bad beat, that doesn't tilt me as much as like, somebody taking forever to act. Like that tilts me. And, generally I'm kind of a introverted solo person. Like I live alone. I travel alone. Like I'm constantly by myself and I kind of enjoy my own company. So when I'm at a poker table around people that I wouldn't be around otherwise, that tilts me.
Well, you brought up the slow play, so now I have to ask you, what do you think can be done about that? Because it seems to have evolved to where you do see a lot more of just really slow playing, especially in, a little bit higher priced buy-in tournaments.
Right. Now, those, as far as being a fan, those I don't watch. EPT, okay. I can't even watch it because it's so slow. I recently watched the Aussie Millions, and they did that, I guess it was called like 100K challenge where they tried out the shot clock. Oh my God. I loved watching that. So I hope that becomes something that, more tournaments will use. It's ridiculous, man. It sucks for the fan to have to watch that.
And I think it sucks for the players too.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, when you're on the table, a lot of times, somebody's taking an inordinate amount of time to, open fold something. And it's kind of like, what are you doing? It's just, I want to see hands as a player and as a fan too. So.
And see, and you're kind of like me, like both of us will play some of the lower buy-in stuff. Mm-hmm. And that stuff doesn't have great structures. I'll never forget. There was a guy, first level, probably the first hand he's dealt, under the gun, he kind of like pulls his shades down. He like shuffles his hand. He looks at his cards. Then he takes his shades off and then folds the hand. Mm. And I'm thinking like, you really have to go through all that production on the very first hand of this, turbo low stakes tournament. Some of the tournaments I play, you get like one orbit per level because of how slow these people play.
I feel your pain because, as you said, I play in some of the same types of events. And I think they've seen it on TV or they've seen it, watching the EPTs or something. And they think they have to do it too, not realizing they're shooting themselves in their own foot, so to speak, because you are cutting the hands you get to see. And it can be super irritating.
Big pet peeve of mine.
And what advice would you have for someone who's listening to this and thinking, oh, well, perhaps I can, leave my job and start following poker around? What would you say to them if someone wanted to sort of have this poker lifestyle without necessarily looking for the high stakes?
I would say the first thing I would say is you have to work on the expense side of the income sheet. Like everybody wants to talk about, revenue, how much money poker players are making. And like there's poker players who've like, had cash for millions and millions of dollars and they have nothing to show for it. So you got to work on your expenses. So if you can kind of get your expenses as low as possible, I think you can kind of get some of these same experiences I've had in poker without the big scores or having, a lot of money coming into it. My first year coming to Vegas, I brought I want to say a $2,000 roll. And so if you game select well, you can have a pretty decent summer, even with a roll that small. I would recommend the tournaments down at Binion's. There's some pretty good value around. Not only are the buy-ins lower for those tournaments, they're generally easier. So if you want to actually win as opposed to just come and play and lose, I would say avoid the WSOP 5Ks and maybe maybe hit, some $200, $400 tournaments here and there. So yeah, the advice I would give people for, trying to do what I'm doing is, get creative about your expenses and really take stock of who you are and what you need and spend your money on the things that you want and you need and not the things that society says you're supposed to spend your money on.
Now, on the other side of that, how would you recommend somebody who wants to do what you're doing prepare, and learn the strategy of the game?
My primary game right now is multi-table tournaments, and I learned how to play at Tournament Poker Edge. So I would suggest training sites. Use a lot of books, but I think the majority of the books I read are more geared towards cash games. So if people are interested in that, I would recommend Ed Miller books. I love Ed Miller's books. Also, the recent book that Jonathan Little did that you co-authored with him is one that I highly recommend. So as far as strategies, books, training sites, and just come out to events and get to know people. I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of really smart poker friends. So just having conversations with those guys, I just get immensely better.
And then the question we always ask, what's the worst tilt you've ever seen at the table? What's the most extreme thing you've seen?
That's a good question. I don't have anything jumping out at me right now. I could give you something that I've done, but it was online, not necessarily at a live table.
We'll take it.
Okay, so this is pretty good. So before I left my job to travel and play poker, I used to be an 8th grade math teacher. And I owned a house. So I had this, middle-class job and a middle-class house and a middle-class neighborhood. None of that made me happy. And I had a long-term girlfriend living with me at the time. And when she and I broke up and she left, I decided, okay, this is not really the life I want. So I'm just going to do what I want to do. So I left the house and quit my job. And I basically became homeless, jobless, and alone. And I've been happy as a lamb ever since. But when I was in this house, I used to play online. And this was I've just started getting into tournaments at this time. Before sit and goes, it was more I didn't have tilt issues in sit and goes because there was less at stake. And I would play 21 is my max at a time. I didn't have time to tilt. But with MTTs, I would play fewer tables and there was so much more on the line. And you have to get so lucky to go deep into MTT that when things didn't go right, I would lose it. And I would literally punch my wall and I would punch holes in my wall. And I can remember one day punching my wall. I would punch it. It was this small hole that got increasingly big every time I would punch it. And then one day I noticed there was a wire back there that said something either 5 or 50,000 volts. I can't remember what it was. That cured my tilt issues quickly. I never punched it again after I saw that. So that's probably the most extreme thing I've personally ever done.
At least you stopped when you saw the wire.
Yeah. And it was a situation where it was early. I've gotten a lot better now. I hear some of the other stories that people have, but yeah, that's probably the extent of my extreme tilt.
And if people want to hear about you, find you on Twitter, watch you on Twitch, how can they find you?
Okay, so my Twitch stream is twitch.tv/Carlos Welch. I call it the homeless poker player. That's like my little Twitch moniker. And I have to remind people that I call myself homeless because I live in a van, not because I'm poor. A lot of people kind of get, offended by me using that term. And if they do, I'll say, if you don't feel comfortable calling me homeless, you can call me home free. So twitch.tv/Carlos Welch, and Twitter is at Hip Hop 101 Trivia.
Excellent. And so if you want to watch an actually happy poker player playing poker, check out Carlos. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show, Carlos. It's enjoyable hearing your stories. And it's as I say, I think really, really important for people to try and remember the joy that's in the game. As I said, you're playing a game for a living. Try and be happy, because, a lot of people have a lot worse in most cases.
Yes, you have a duty to be happy. And if you can't do it for yourself, do it for the Dominican cleaning lady who makes like 11 cents an hour. If she can be happy, you can be happy.
Well said.
Yeah, as I say, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you in Vegas.
Yes.
Awesome. Cheers, Carlos.
All right, thank you. Bye.
What a nice guy. It was really good to have Carlos on the show and really to hear about another side of professional poker.
It is like a whole different kind of mindset than what we're normally talking about on here. But I think it's super important for people to realize that how you set yourself up, how you set your life up, all those sorts of things can make a huge difference in the enjoyment you get out of it.
And I mean, he's setting himself up to have very, very limited pressure in his poker. So, he's playing with a good bankroll management. And then obviously, as he said, the life roll management as well. And I think that really helps a player stay confident, stay calm. If they know, it doesn't matter if they don't run well for a few months, because the bills are still paid and they're still fine.
Well, the fewer bills you have to pay, right? The less you have to win. And it sounds like he's really got that, down pat.
Certainly very, very down pat.
I also really enjoyed the fact that you can tell he still really loves the game and he hasn't gotten, jaded or cynical about it.
Yeah, and actually to have it being a goal to not get jaded and sort of enjoy the fact that he is playing a game, I think is a really good goal to have, and something that, the professionals out here who do listen to this, if you're saying, oh, I hate my job, really think about it. How can you try and enjoy it again? How can you find that love again? Because your days will pass much faster and much more enjoyably if you can reignite that passion for poker.
And on the other hand, maybe think about what kind of job you'd have to get if you were to go back into the traditional workforce. And that might, really, make you think, hey, like Carlos was saying, he's here on a random Monday in Las Vegas. Could you do that if you worked a traditional job? Maybe not, probably not, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, so some great advice there from him. And as I say, just really interesting to hear about another side of the industry. So, Tricia, where can people find out about you?
You can check out my website, drtriciacardner.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Tricia Cardner. I think that's it, right?
I think so, yeah. And my website is pokermindcoach.com if you're interested in my products or any of my coaching. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Mindset Advantage podcast with Elliot Rowe and Dr. Tricia Cardner. To get any resources mentioned in the episode or to listen to past shows, visit pokermindcoach.com/TMA podcast. Thanks for listening.